Buddy. Thanks, Catherine, for that super generous introduction. I'm going to go ahead and take these headphones off now. So if anyone has anything to say to me, if I'm too quiet or too loud or anything like that, type it in the chat. Yeah, I'm going to be playing some fiddle tunes for you today, mostly because I chose to focus this workshop on a man named Will Adams, who lived in Kengar in Kensington, Maryland, 20 minutes from where I grew up. And I wanted to call the session Will Adams and Beyond because while Will Adams is a super important musical figure in our nation's history and often under-discussed, and we'll talk about the why of both of those things in the minutes to come, but I also wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the other musicians who are in the Montgomery County area, not commonly known to members of our local community, but the DC-Baltimore corridor has been considered one of the national hotspots of traditional music, of bluegrass music, of country music, for probably the past 50 years at this point, since at least the 70s. And that community is still going very strong. So I'm going to share with you some things by Will Adams, some things that I learned from other fiddlers and banjo players who live in Montgomery County, who I played with in Montgomery County. I did a lot of learning on this instrument back home when I was living in DC. And a lot of the folks that lived or continue to live in Montgomery County are near and dear to my heart. So I hope to get some Alan Jabor in here for any local folklore fans, some Rachel Eddy, and some other good stuff. Pardon my medium disheveled appearance. I don't normally show up with wet hair, but I got water back in my apartment a couple hours ago. Pipe burst. We had too much water for a little while, but now we're fine. probably Will Adams' best known piece. It's called Tie Your Dog, Sally Gal. There are not very many recordings of Will Adams floating around in the world. For whatever reason, most of the recordings that were made have not been released, but that is one that has been released. It is available for purchase on iTunes and elsewhere. I also recorded it with my friend Tatiana Hargraves on my first album, Reparations. Or my first EP, I suppose. Back in 2017, when the world was so much brighter. Well, I'm debating with myself how much detail about Will Adams' life to get into. For a long time, not that much was known. Like I said, there are about 30 recordings, I think, that were made by a man named Mike Seeger, who also lived in Kensington. The Seeger family are notable residents of Montgomery County as well. For anybody who is into traditional music, into folklore, any of that stuff. Mike went and made those recordings, and there is kind of a set of them discreetly floating around. I got those from a friend back in 2016, something like that, and immediately jumped in and learned a bunch of the tunes, which is, you know, always a choice of questionable merit since nobody really knows them. But I have had the opportunity to go around and teach in recent years, and this is a tune that I taught at Dare to Be Square, which is a square dance festival event that happens in DC every spring or summer. It's in the summer because I was very sweaty. And I was able to teach this tune, Smoky Hole, which is another Will Adams tune. And not a couple weeks later, Geraldine, which is a band composed of partially Montgomery County residents, they sent a video of themselves playing it at one of their shows. So this is one of the few Will Adams tunes I've been able to successfully reintroduce into the canon of music which is played. go. Smoky Hole, another Will Adams tune. I'm going to switch gears now and talk a little bit less about Will Adams and about the beyond part. Will Adams, as I mentioned before, is a pretty important historical example for this musical tradition. We know that not too long ago there were a lot of black banjo players and fiddlers out there in the world, and that at one point black folks were really the dominant force in banjo fiddle music in this country. But we don't have very many examples of recorded musicians from north of the Mason-Dixon line. Now, whether or not Maryland constitutes the North throughout history has been a point of debate. I don't want to get into that debate right now. But that being said, we do know that Will Adams is the northernmost example of a black fiddler that we have. We know that there were fiddlers who were living as far north as Ohio, that the first banjo recorded in this country was recorded in the hands of a black musician in New York in 1725, I want to say, but I could be wrong. I'm going to stand by that. And I will go through some books that you can read about specific dates, the development of the tradition, that sort of thing. So we know that there have been black musicians playing fiddle, banjo, old-time music, string band music all up and down the East Coast for as long as black people have been on the East Coast. However, we don't have very many recorded examples. Will Adams is one who I find particularly fascinating, largely because a number of the tunes that he was recorded playing, including the two that I just played for you, have not been recorded from any other fiddler. Now, he might have just been writing all of these things on his own. He might have just been like a really creative dude. But I also think that there's something to be said for a different cultural voice coming out. We know that throughout the South, the black musicians who did get recorded by folklorists often had one set of tunes or songs that they would play for black audience members and one that they would play for white audience members. And it could be that Will Adams was tapping into a different repertoire than a lot of them were. I want to talk a little bit about just the shape of the history of this tradition, because I think it's important to understand these individuals as part of a larger picture. And I think I like to tell people when we're talking about old-time music, string band music, the story begins on the slave ships. Will Adams, of course, was recorded centuries down the line from the beginning of this tradition, but we know that once people were brought onto the slave ships in Africa and were en route to this country, one of the main ways that the ship captains would keep them alive through the voyage, both through physical fitness and morale, was to bring them up on deck and make them dance. And we know that that was a mix of European and African dances done to a mixture of European and African instruments. So right away, you have this confluence of musical traditions that have never been in contact with one another before in the form of the European and the African, and of course, many different African musical traditions, languages, cultures, etc., that would not have been mutually intelligible, would not have been in close contact in prior years. So a bunch of things are all coming together at one time. And the important thing to know is that the ancestors of this instrument, the banjo, come from Africa. The accounting of the Jola people is usually cited as the main historical antecedent of the banjo. But there are a number of other ones, like the halam or ngoni, played by the Wolof people. There are quite a few instruments that are this spike lute construction and that are played in this downstroke style that made it over to this country. In addition, there are a number of African ethnic groups that have their own fiddle traditions, that had them at the time of the Middle Passage, at the time of the transatlantic slave trade. And we know that once folks got here, they were marketed partially on the perceived aptitudes of their ethnic group from Africa. So, say Igbo people were considered too large and too predisposed to violence and were thus consigned to a life out in the field far away from the white folks, whereas, say, the Fulani people were considered smaller and more intelligent by dint of their high degree of Islamic blood. It's ugly, right? They were brought into very close contact with white folks because they were considered ideal to work in the house. Now, the Fulani are one of the groups that had its own indigenous fiddle tradition. So we have these people coming with the skill sets to play this kind of music. And we have them very early on in the employment of white enslavers performing this music for social gatherings, etc. And out of that environment, out of the emergence of the fiddle tradition in the African American community by the end of the 17th century, and the banjo appearing also in the 17th century in the Caribbean, but making its way to the continental United States by the early 1700s. That is the background of this tradition. We often get kind of sold this old-time music. It's Irish music, but different, or Scots-Irish music that came over here and changed somehow. Sometimes a more enlightened version is Scots-Irish music with African rhythms. The last one is true to an extent, but I think the error there is in arbitrarily deciding that the origin point of this tradition is in those European populations, when folks like Will Adams were playing the music all along, and still are today. And he's so important as just an exemplar of a part of that tradition that did not get committed to record in the way that it should have been. I'm going to play a couple selections here that are from other black old-time musicians, some of whom are Will Adams' contemporaries, some recorded by the same people, and some of whom were enslaved themselves. And this first one is called Goodbye, Honey, You Call That Gone. And it comes from the playing of a man named Lucius Smith from Sardis, Mississippi. It's the first track on my recent album, Spider Tales. That's Goodbye, Honey, You Call That Gone. And I love that. It's just an example of the way these African aesthetics survived the journey to this country. I love live streaming. Got these nice siren accompaniments. So this is another tune that comes from a black fiddler who lived in the North, which I think is fun to kind of set next to Will Adams's repertoire and think about the similarities there and the kind of rejection of conventional Western major and minor keys, that kind of thing, the elaboration on a theme rather than the creation of two distinct melodies. That's something that both these fiddlers share in common. This one originally came from an enslaved fiddler by the name of Alonzo Janes, but it came through me by way of two other fiddlers who, one learned it from him, the other learned it from the other, and that one taught it to me. Whew. And I want to explore just a little bit of a different facet of Will Adams's life, which is that Will Adams, like most black people at that time, had a social life that somewhat revolved around the church. And of course, there is still a historic church in Kengar that you can go visit. And I just think it's important to represent that type of music as well, the spirituals, the gospel that would have been happening there, largely because the church and the black string band tradition have a very intertwined and oftentimes antagonistic relationship with one another throughout history. The black church was almost certainly one of the reasons why the tradition declined in the way that it did. And we can talk more about that in the Q&A if you're interested. But I want to sing an old spiritual that comes from back in those times. Of course, we've heard plenty of them before, but the body of spirituals that has made it into the present day is a lot smaller than what there used to be. The more you read these old books where people really were just writing songs in their community and singing those together, that was the goal. Very little of that ultimately made it into our era. So I'm going to sing one for you that was collected by a man named John Wesley Worth III, who was one of the very few black collectors of black music, black folk music at the time. The angels done bowed down, the angels done bowed down, the angels done bowed down, whoa, yes, my Lord. When Jesus was hanging up on the cross, the angels kept silent till God went off. Then the angels hung their harps on the willow trees to give satisfaction till God was pleased. The angels done bowed down, the angels done bowed down, the angels done bowed down, whoa, yes, my Lord. Go down, angels, to the flood. Blow out the sun, turn the moon into blood. Come back, angels, bolt the door. The time that's been will be no more. The angels done bowed down. The angels done bowed down. The angels done bowed down, whoa, yes, my Lord. Now we're going to return to strictly Montgomery County. Wrap up with some tunes from a couple of my favorite present-day fiddlers from Montgomery County, and then a couple from Will Adams. This next one I learned from Rachel Eddy, who is a phenomenal old-time musician, full-time, lived in Bethesda for a very long time, and lived in Bethesda when I met her. She just moved to Alexandria recently. They just moved to Alexandria. If you were to go to an old-time jam session anywhere in the DC area, Baltimore area, this tune would be one you would hear commonly. It's called Whiteface. It was written by a guy named Joe Thrift, who now lives in North Carolina. quick tuning. Hold on. One of the lesser known aspects of old time music is that different tunes happen in different tunings, and sometimes you have to change. And I just did, and my fiddle's not agreeing with me. Oop. Okay, let's see here. I learned to play this tune from Alan Jabor, who some of you who are involved in old-time music and folklore may remember. He worked for a long time with the Library of Congress, and he was a fantastic fiddle player. I remember the very summer I started playing this instrument, showing up at jams, and Alan would be there. And every single time I would ask him to play this tune, and he got so annoyed with me about it. This is called Betty Likens, and he learned it from his fiddle mentor, Henry Reed. It's one of my favorites. I don't know about the rest of you, but I miss Alan quite a bit. I'm going to play a couple more Will Adams tunes for you, and then we'll take some questions, I think. This next one is called Wild Horse at Stony Point. Well, that's what we think it's called. It's very similar to a tune that everyone else calls that, but Will Adams did not know the titles for a lot of his tunes, so most of the recordings just say unknown and then have a little name in parentheses next to them. So this is probably Wild Horse at Stony Point, and I recorded it under that name with my friend Evie Layden on her album Riding the Rooster a couple years ago. Some Wild Horse at Stony Point. See some good questions coming in. I'm going to play one more for you. This is probably my all-time favorite Will Adams tune. It's called Getting Up Cows. And he plays it in this bizarre tuning that not very many other people use. So on a regular fiddle, it's G, D, A, D. So another D on the top. And he plays probably the strangest tune I know out of this tuning. It's called Getting Up Cows. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm sorry if I've been a little bit less organized than I like to be. Had a long night, had a long morning, gonna have another long night tonight. But I'm grateful for this little respite here, and I hope you're enjoying it too. Getting Up Cows. Thank you. I'm going to check out these questions now.
All right. Thanks so much, Jake. Yeah, we definitely have some questions there. I think Matt Logan, my boss, has a question, so I'm going to give him first billing here because he signs my paychecks. So.
That is an excellent life choice, Matt. Jake, that was amazing. It was so happy you were able to overcome your water issues, make it worse today. But the question I had was related to I had heard that bluegrass music is almost a conversation between instruments, that it's very much this interactive, um, almost improvisational conversation. And the videos I've seen of you, and then obviously today, you've been performing by yourself for the most part. And I wonder if you can talk about that. And does that present different challenges? And is it done intentionally, or how did that come about?
Yeah, well, I think both things have always been in play when it comes to old time music, and I should say this is somewhat distinct from bluegrass. In that bluegrass is understood to have originated in like the 1930s, 1940s,
Okay.
with Earl Scruggs, Bill Monroe, etc. And this is music that comes from before then. It is still typically an ensemble music because it originated as dance music, and even back in the earliest days, you probably wouldn't have just had a fiddle player playing for dances. Perhaps, past the 1600s or whatever. Once the Sears Roebuck catalog comes out, everybody can get a guitar. Guitars are everywhere. Banjos had been everywhere for a while. It is normally an ensemble music. I wound up playing solo a lot just because I'm working with a very obscure repertoire, and I have a few friends that I like to carry around to have play with me, but obviously that's not going to happen these days. Will Adams is somewhat distinct. Will Adams, I should say, is somewhat distinct in this regard as well, because all of his recordings are solo. And somebody here asked about whether he played solo at home or whether he played in a band. Did he play for dances? I think the answer here is yes. Most of the time in those old days, the folks who were not recording, who were not making their living full time as musicians, didn't really have fixed bands. This is kind of still how the community runs today. It's like when someone hires you for a dance, you put a band together and you go play the dance with those people. Will Adams had a banjo player that he played with regularly. I'm going to forget the dude's name because my brain is a colander today, but that being said, I am going to screen share or drop a link or something. My friend Christina Gaddy, who's a phenomenal historian and fiddle player, actually, from Baltimore, wrote a really in-depth article about Will Adams's life that brought to light a bunch of stuff that none of us knew about him before, and that dropped just a couple months ago. So I'm going to go look that up and make sure I share it with you before we're done here today. That has more information about the folks that he played with and in the context that he played with. He was recorded by himself. My understanding is that later in his life he played mostly by himself.
Okay. And Jake, I know you're looking at the questions there, and there's definitely some great ones in there. I want to go with this, the last two first that have come in. Dan is actually our board president, so he's actually above my boss. So how much of what you do is from improvisation and memory, and how much exactly is written down, or is any of it written down?
None of it is written down. I mean, someone somewhere may have written it down. What I do, I can actually show you. I can share my screen if you want. I have all those recording files, and I will drag them into this software and slow them down so that I can hear everything that's going on, and I do it 100% by ear. Try to copy the bowings, copy the notes, etc. That's the way that you do it. There is some improvisation, but it's not really in the way that we're used to hearing it, and that's one of the main differentiating characteristics between old-time music and bluegrass music. That bluegrass music, I think what you mean when you say is a conversation between instruments, is that people will make up whole breaks. They'll take solos as they're going, and that lets them interact in this really fluid, dynamic way. And the same type of improvisation happens with old-time music, but you would never take a break. It really involves the sort of theme and variation thing that Will Adams really emphasized in the making of his tunes, that each time you go through the parts, you might play them a little bit differently. Slide here where you didn't before. Trill on this note where you didn't before. Sometimes you'll change out one phrase for another phrase, and it gives it a different feeling. It's all about listening really closely and finding the energy in those small nuances. And Will Adams was really good at going through a tune, figuring out different ways of playing it as he went. He was criminally modest. Most of his recordings are him just being like, he'll rip a tune and play it awesomely, be like, I don't know it. That kind of thing. And that definitely still happens. but it's a balance between the improvisational and the not necessarily written, but through composed.
If you want to go ahead and pull up that musician, the fiddler in Baltimore, I'm going to read the next question here. It's a little bit longer, so that should give you a couple seconds to pull that up. Someone says, do you know Eddie Stubbs, a great fiddler player with Montgomery County's Johnson Mountain Boys? They don't play together anymore. Eddie was in my 8th grade geography class at Gaithersburg Junior High in the 70s. I've heard that Eddie has one of the best old-time music collections in the country. He introduced me to this great music and bluegrass. Forever grateful. So, do you know Eddie Stubbs? Is the substance of that this very personal story.
I do not know Eddie Stubbs, but I do know his name. That is the short answer. I'm sorry, I don't have a better story to tell you.
That's okay. That's okay. But you know of him, so
yes,
you're aware
yes,
of his
absolutely.
music. Okay.
And I do have that article ready to pull up.
Yep. Okay, so you should be able to hit share screen there if I've
all right
done what I'm supposed to do. Here we go.
All right. So I don't know if I have the means to send out a message to everybody that has this link in it. But if you go to christinagaddy.com, hit the blog thing, and then look at Will Adams, this is a fantastically detailed look at his life, census records, draft cards, etc. That really goes into point by point the parts of his life. I have so much respect for Christina and what she did here. She has this knack of really diving deep on all the things that she studied, and this made some really important elaborations and corrections to the narrative of Will Adams's life, notably including the fact that his name was mistyped on the cards that are in the archive with the recordings as Will Adam, and everybody just went and called him Will Adam for like 50 years. And she went and looked him up and was like, guys, did no one even Google this dude? It's Will Adams. And managed to dig up a lot about his repertoire, his musical background, his life. I know somebody here had a bunch of questions about, I see Robert Engelman.
Yep.
When did he live? Born and raised in Kengar. Family still there. I don't believe there are any descendants. He lived in the early mid-1900s. I think he was a transplant, but I don't remember where exactly from. And all of the things that you want to know are in here.
It looks like very well researched. Yes, you can actually, if you want to copy that link, you can put it in the chat.
Oh, can everybody see the chat? Sweet.
The chat is, you should be able to send in the chat at least. I think, yeah, you should be able to send in the chat. I'll turn that on there.
Panelists and attendees,
yep,
I see.
Yep.
All right.
That's some phenomenal research. We might be getting in touch with her.
Yes.
To get some more. That's something that we could certainly explore, since that's local history. Yeah. Okay. So obviously, Robert Engelman has a bunch of questions about there. Robert, check out that link. I think that probably you could answer most of your questions. The next question I have here is, are there versions of these songs with lyrics? And if not, how did musicians generally come up with the titles of the songs they wrote? Do you know the story behind the titles of any of the songs you played today?
I don't know the story behind those songs. Some of them seem to be onomatopoeic songs, right? Like Tie Your Dog, Sally Gal has those two sections of the song that sound like a barking dog, which happens pretty often in black music, in jazz, in blues, etc. You often have people doing what you would call madrigalism in Western art music, where the music illustrates textual content of the songs. I'm going to share my screen again and pull up my list here of Will Adams tunes. So these are all tunes of his, and as you see, a bunch of them say unnamed. I'm not sure whether these speculative titles are from the original cards, or whether these have passed through a number of hands before they made their way to me. And other people may have added them. So some of these, like Arkansas Traveler, Haste to the Wedding, Girl I Left Behind Me, and a couple other ones on here, If That Is Wild Horse at Stony Point, If That Is Salt River, If That Is Mississippi Sawyer. These are really common tunes that may have been published at some point under that title. Either, you know, they might have been affiliated with minstrel shows, there might have been broadside publications. Soldier's Joy, of course, is an old one that goes all the way back to the Civil War. So probably there's a mixture of things going on there. Some of them probably were published. Other times, even now, oftentimes when we compose instrumental pieces, we just pick a name. You know, it's just, you'll think of a catchy title and go, that could be a tune name. And then the next time you write a tune, you name the tune that, and that's how it goes. Sometimes people write a tune to commemorate a particular event, sometimes, or a particular place. I don't know whether Will Adams did indeed go down to the raccoon's den to get a bag of corn. But he might have just thought, that's a ridiculous thing to say, I'm going to name the tune that.
All right. So I got just two more questions here. Nancy, of course, says, thank you so much. Is enjoying the music and has been very educational. Clarence asks, so is there a traditional Irish connection to American bluegrass fiddle music?
Yes, absolutely. So the folks who we consider to be the biggest influence on the tradition are the Scots-Irish people, the Ulster Scots. So they lived in Ireland for a couple hundred years before they came here. Technically, ethnically, they are Scottish, though. So I would say yes, broadly. There's Scottish and Irish influence, particularly the further you get into the mountains in places like West Virginia, Western North Carolina, you hear it really strongly. Today, I was talking about a different facet of the tradition. I think it's important to remember that there were black people playing fiddles, playing banjos in this country before the mass immigration of Scots-Irish folks to this country actually took place. And just question the narrative that we've been taught, that that is the origin point of the music and everything else is an add-on. But it's absolutely a very important part of the tradition, a very important part of the sound.
Okay. Last question I have here, and then I've got a few more myself. Did many of these old-time fiddlers know how to read music, or was this purely done by ear?
Some of them did. It depends There are a couple different things at play there. Some of it is a class situation, who had access to classical training, who did not. Some of it is a church thing, which churches were using hymnals and which were not. In any event, the likely answer is that some of them probably knew how to read music. Most of them probably did not. And even if they knew how to read music, they probably didn't use the music to transfer these things. A lot of the ways that this music spread was someone going from one town to the next, right? Whether they're going to visit a relative, sometimes there were traveling fiddlers who just did that to make a living. Go from one town to the next, play with the musicians there. You'd hear this person play the tune for you one time, and then you'd have to reproduce it from memory. You'd have to just use your pitch memory to reproduce the tune later, which is probably how there wound up being 80 versions of every single tune, right? So no, I would say it's mostly oral.
Okay. All right. So then I have a two-part question. First of all, if someone is interested in learning more, or sorry, hearing more of some of this music, what do you recommend? I know you have your album Spider Tales. Are there other? Oh, I got one more question that came in. We'll get to that in a second. So Spider Tales, does that include a lot of Will Adams songs, or is that just more of a broad spectrum of old time music?
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the last bit real quick?
So let me back up a little bit. If someone's interested in hearing more of this type of music, where do you recommend? And then the corollary to that would be, what would you define Spider Tales, your album, as?
Mm-hmm. So Spider Tales definitely has a lot of good old time music on it. I think part of what I was trying to do with that album was sort of trouble the boundaries between bluegrass, old-time blues, gospel, jazz, all these things that before the advent of the recording industry were sort of one big musical genre morass that was feeding off itself and growing of its own accord, and then got split off not on the basis of sound but the basis of race. This is a whole other hour-long presentation that I could give you. So yes and no. There are a lot of great old-time musicians in and around Montgomery County. I would recommend you look up Kathy Fink and Marcy Markser, who have lived in Silver Spring for... They've lived in Silver Spring for 20 years, and I'm pretty sure they lived in Chevy Chase before that. So they've been around for a very long time. Kathy's a Baltimore native, and Kathy was the first woman to win the banjo contest at the Appalachian String Band Music Festival, which is like the biggest competition for us. So she's really where it's at. Brad Kolodner and his band Charm City Junction are leading one of the largest old-time scenes in the country right now up in Baltimore. Around DC, you have Rachel Eddy, who I mentioned before. There are a number of people who, hopefully, when all of this clears up, will be out playing again. I know there have been regular jam sessions at Tacoma Park, Tacoma Bevco, and in a few other places, but I don't know what's going to be left on the other side,
Sure,
unfortunately.
So, all right, I've got a couple more, and I know you probably want to get going, Jake, but the question here is, could you explain how the Black church contributed to the decline of this type of music?
Absolutely. So there are a number of factors that led to the decline of old-time music, and I want to be clear, I'm not like laying this at the feet of the Black church. It's more complicated than that. But throughout America, the understanding was that banjo and fiddle music was like drinking, carousing, sinning music. So post-emancipation, the Black church is the main organizing body for the Black community. Our schools happen through the church. Our social events happen through the church. They were making all the decisions about what music was going to be present, what behavior was going to be permitted, and they wanted to keep it godly, as it were. So the banjo and fiddle crowd lost a lot of their audience when that happened. And of course you have these things happening outside of church context, right? Further south, you have juke joints. There are blues musicians. Around the same time, urbanization is happening. Guitars are appearing in the countryside. All sorts of changes are taking place that led to the transition from banjo to blues guitar. That led oftentimes the transition from the fiddle to the electric guitar later on. There are a lot of lines to be traced there. The church is only part of that, but it was a part, just enforcing social norms.
Okay, and then the last one, I'm just going to close with this because it is 4:45 here. Do you have an oldest fiddle tune definitely made up by a Black fiddler? For example, is there something from a Black Civil War camp that is from that era?
I don't know if I have anything that's from a Black Civil War camp specifically. I play several tunes that are from enslaved musicians. One of which I played for you today, Over the Mountain, which comes from Alonzo Janes. I don't have time to retune my fiddle for it, but on the album that my duo put out, Tui, T-U-I is our name. The album's called Pretty Little Mister. There's a tune on there called Whoa Mule that comes from a fiddler named Elijah Cox, who was born to parents that fled slavery. Like, they were on the Underground Railroad, and he was born in Canada. They moved back down to Michigan, and then he went to Texas as one of the Buffalo Soldiers. And he is the oldest fiddler ever to have been recorded, period. So he definitely is in that time period. He would have been alive for a lot of that. You can't really find those recordings floating around, but feel free to get in touch with me through my website if you want to hear more about that.
Okay, and what's your website, Jake?
JakeBlunt.com.
Okay. And I apologize. Apparently, I've been mispronouncing your last name. I should have asked that.
I'm not even worried.
I'm sure you get it all the time. It happens to me too. So, all right, Jake, this has been phenomenal. I'm blown away. You know, I found myself tapping my feet, and it's a good thing my camera's off. Let me say. I personally am looking forward to eventually seeing you in person and getting up on my feet. Any last comments before we wrap up today?
No, thank you so much for having me and bearing with me through the chaos of the last 16 hours.
Well, you persevered, and I'm very impressed, and again, I'm blown away, and I'm sure we'll be in touch again soon. So thank you so much, Jake.
Thank you.
Have a great day. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera on and turn yours off. So.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for bearing with us and coming along on this journey with us. it's certainly been an adventure, and we're glad you stuck around. Just again, as a reminder, we'll be posting all the recordings at the end of in about a week. So I know we've gotten a lot of emails asking about that, and I apologize for not being super clear about that. We will have the recordings. We want to make sure that they are in there as good as they can be. We want to take out the obvious mistakes, maybe me stumbling over a few words or something. But we'll get those out to you in about a week, and we will be sending out emails. If you would like to see those recordings and you did not purchase a premiere ticket, you can still upgrade. Send us an email at historyconference@montgomeryhistory.org, and we'll talk you through that. It's very easy, and it's not painful. Last thing from me before I turn it over to Matt here, we have sent out a oops, wrong button, a survey. We want your feedback, and obviously this is very different. We've always met up in the past, and this is not in person, much to all of our dismay. But and we don't know what the future holds. Obviously, we definitely want to get it in person as soon as possible. But maybe there's a hybrid option. Maybe we're in person and broadcasting. So give us your feedback as we move forward after taking a short rest this weekend as we prepare for the next round of the history conference. And I did put that link in the comments. So again, please send us that, and we will send out an email reminder for that. Okay, again, thanks so much for sticking with us. I'm going to turn it over to Matt Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Gagel. I get the final word here, I guess. I just wanted to once again thank everyone. It's been as Matt said, a fun journey. It's been over 8 days, and we have encountered things we weren't anticipating, and we made a lot of contingency plans that we didn't have to call on. So, but all in all, it's been wonderful. Again, we want to thank the sponsors, the presenters, the introducers, and our planning committee. But most of all, I wanted to thank Matt Gagel. He has done yeoman's work. The guy, I think all of you have seen his manner, his affability, and so forth, and it's absolutely made this event possible. Clearly, we couldn't have done it without Matt. So please join me. We're going to have a little round of applause for Matt. And with that, I think we can adjourn the 2021 Montgomery County History Conference. So again, thank you, everyone.
All right, everyone, go have a cold drink and bundle up for the storm that's headed our way. So have a great evening. We'll see y'all next time. All right, goodbye.